Hey, welcome to Whole Human Psychology. I'm Isaac Wicker. Today we're diving into part 3 of our 8-part series of threat cycles. So these are cycles that keep us in this threatened place, even when the threat's over. So today we're going to be digging into the cycle called Ye Seek and Ye Find. Basically, it's about information processing. So what I look for in the world is what I'm more likely to discover in the world. And then when I discover it, that confirms, oh yeah, I should have been looking for that. And then I keep looking for it. And so let's just dig more into information processing for now. So information processing is so essential for human life. Basically, there's way too much out there for us to actually process everything. And so we have to selectively process the world around us. And then how we process the world informs us about how the world works. So we take in select information, and based on that select information, we form our understanding about a situation, about our present situation, about our past, and then we use that information to predict the future. And then those information cues, our understanding based on that information, affects how we think about ourselves, affects how we think about other people and the world and how the world works. And so, of course, that affects our behavior and that affects our emotions. And so we have this that goes back and forth. So we have this world that we're processing, this information, we're taking in tons of information. And from that information, we're forming an understanding of the world. But it's also our understanding of the world that tells us what information to take in and process. Because again, we can only do a limited amount of our information can we actually process. And so our understanding of the world tells us what's important in the world. And what's important in the world is what we try to look for, what we try to process, what we try to understand. And so we have this loop that says, my understanding of the world and what's important is going to be the filter I use to take in select information that I think is important out here. And then based on that select information, I confirm or disconfirm, but more often confirm what I believe about the world. And this is really important just for how we're operating, because again, it connects with how I react emotionally and how I behave. How I understand my past, how I understand my present, how I predict the future. So behavior isn't just the reacting in the present moment, but I'm actually planning and engaging for the future because I expect this result. I expect this outcome if I do this set of behaviors or if the other people do this set of behaviors. And predicting is really important for survival. If we're getting back to our sense of survival mode, threat mode. Because you don't want to just be reacting to the present situation. You want to be able to predict and understand when is a threat going to come. Because we don't want to be just waiting until the threat's around our neck or charging at us. We want to be careful. Okay, this situation, based on how I understand the world, could actually be more dangerous. And I shouldn't go over there because that's the most dangerous part. And I'm more likely to be safe over here. And if I do this, then I'm less likely to be attacked. And so if we keep thinking about things in terms of survival, it can help give us a framework for, okay, this is really important. So how I predict the future often is how I understand the past. And then I'm behaving in the present moment to kind of optimize my future. Or optimize survival if we're in threat mode, because threat mode is all about survival. The theme of threat mode is survive now, live later. And this, when we're in threat mode, what are we looking for? We're looking for threats. So that's going to be the main filter that we use to process the world around us. The danger filter. What We're going to say what's important is what could be dangerous, what could be problematic. And so we look around the world intent on finding danger. So we have this sense of vigilance. And we want to find danger as soon as possible, when it's as little as possible. We don't want it to blow up and then have to fight the big scary monster. We want to fight the danger or avoid the danger at the earliest possible time. And so we're in threat mode, looking around the world. What are we looking for? We're looking for all the problems. And so what are we going to find? All the problems. And even if they're not yet problems that are going to impact us now, we're going to find the tiny problems. And then we're going to be worried about how they're going to be big problems. And then we're going to try to deal with this problem, that problem, that problem, that problem, that problem. And so when we're in threat mode, we're in this state of vigilance. I need to be safe. I need to survive. And a huge part of that is being able to find all the things that are going to damage us. All the things that are right now problematic, or in the future could be problematic, or when is this going to be problematic? And another part of this is that we interpret ambiguous data on the side of threat. So it's like, hey, I don't actually know if this is bad or good for me. I'll just assume it's bad for me, because that's safer. I'm going to just assume you're bad for me. I'm going to assume this is bad for me, because then I can avoid it. And maybe it wasn't bad for me, but hey, I avoided it and now I'm safe. And so you can see how we get stuck in this cycle. You seek the threats because you're wanting to stay safe. So you seek the threats and then you find all the threats. And then you're like, oh, good thing I found all those threats. Now I got to do something about all these threats. And you're finding all the threats just keeps you in that threatened space and makes you think, oh, good thing I looked for all those things, because otherwise I wouldn't have found them. And so then you keep looking for more and more and more threats. And you find more and more and more threats. And so this is really about how we understand the world. How we understand the world around us. Ye seek all the threats and ye find all the threats. That sounds exhausting. Even just explaining it, I'm just like, ah. Because you find all the threats with your family. You find all the threats with your friends. You find all the threats at work. You find all the threats in yourself. Everywhere you look, you've got more to deal with because you're finding all these threats. And you have fewer places to be safe and to rest and to relax and to enjoy life. And then when your filter is set on find threats, guess what you're not finding? All the beautiful things. All the things to be grateful for. All the comfortable, awesome, enjoyable things. I like to give this funny example of thinking of a bodyguard at a party. If you're just going to a party, you're finding all the things that are just fun and enjoyable, and you're moved, and you're like, oh, this is great music. If you're a bodyguard at a party, you're finding all the ways that everything could be dangerous. The chaos isn't fun and enjoyable, it's dangerous and problematic. And so it's not that you and the bodyguard are at a different party and that's why the bodyguard's not having fun and you're having fun. It's that the bodyguard is set to threat vigilance, which is so often where we find ourselves. Threat vigilance. And we get stuck because we keep finding all the little tiny things to be worried about, to complain about. If you think about people who are constantly complaining, that's probably where they're at. They're seeing all the things that could be problematic and they're getting stuck there. What if you don't want to live like that? What if you don't want to live stuck in that cycle of seeing the world as problematic and finding all the problems with it and then getting stuck with all those problems and then continuing to kind of close up in that state of vigilance of where are all the problems and what do I have to do about them. This is where you may have heard a lot about gratitude, but I think this is especially where gratitude comes in, because gratitude is a different lens. It's not a vigilance lens. It's a lens that's actually connected to safety. And I do a lot of this work with people I work with my clients, is making them fit on a different lens. So one of the ways I do it is find 10 beautiful moments from your last week. Because I think we can do gratitude in a really sterile way. I'm grateful for this lamp and this computer. I guess it helps me. And I guess I have a roof over my head. But we actually aren't connecting with any feeling of gratitude. We're kind of running through a dry list. Bop, 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 bop. But what matters is connecting with a feeling of gratitude that helps us shift our filter. And so that internal space, what's going on inside our internal world, helps kind of dictate what we process from our external world. Our internal world tells us what's important right now to look at in our external world. And then our external world, after we process it, affects our internal world. So again, this process. So our internal world affects actually how we see the world. Our emotions change how we see on an informational processing level. And then the information that we process and how we see the world continues to either reinforce or change our internal world. It goes back and forth. And so then if you're able to connect with a feeling of gratitude, that actually can start to change. Like, oh, you can actually start to see the world differently because you're connecting with that place and you're reinforcing with your mind, oh, not all of my life is problematic. So I challenge people. This is one of my favorite ways to start a session is, what are 10 beautiful moments from your week? 10 moments that were just awesome. And it can be the sunshine. It can be birds chirping. Or it can be that concert you went to. Or it can be, I don't know, finding $20 on the street. Or it can be a really great conversation you had with your mom. 10 beautiful moments. Another filter I like to add on is 10 moments that you're proud of from the last week. 10 things that you're proud of. And people really, I talked about this in the last video, people really struggle with that. They really, and if you struggle with that, that's even more of a reason to do it. So 10 things you're proud of. What that puts you in that mindset of like, I'm doing good. I'm safe. I can look for ways that the world's going right. 10 beautiful moments, 10 things you're proud of. Those are the ways that the world's going right, that you're doing right. Another way I like to challenge people, and this one's a little bit more in depth, I call it rebranding the future. So you take a situation that you're nervous about that's coming up. So a future situation, maybe it's a birthday party that you're planning, or maybe it's a trip that you're going on, or maybe it's a drive in traffic. You take that situation and first you write out the anxious story. What is your anxiety telling you is going to happen? What's the scary, anxious story? The traffic's going to be terrible, and I'm going to get into an accident, and then I'm going to be super late to this important meeting, and then I'm going to get fired and lose my job, and all the stuff your anxiety can come up with. Like, just write it out. You don't have to get stuck there. You just write it out. That's actually already really important, is to just give voice to anxiety that's outside your head. Because when anxiety is in your head, often it sounds so reasonable. And then you write it on paper, you're like, that's probably not going to happen. But in your head, when it's like stuck in here, it's like, yep, that's exactly what's going to happen, and it's going to be the worst thing ever. But just writing it out actually already disarms it a lot. So first thing, you write out the anxiety story. And then the second thing, you write out the story where everything turns out okay in the end. where actually everything turns out okay. Okay, there was traffic. I got through it. Maybe I was a couple minutes late. Nobody seemed to notice. And I had my work day. Kind of that, yeah, it's just like, actually, disaster didn't happen. Life was okay. And then you write out another version. So these are three different versions of the same thing you're worried about. The version where it's unexpectedly awesome. And that's when you're like, oh, the radio was just hitting the best songs ever. I was cranking up the music. The weather was great. I could roll down my windows. And there was hardly any traffic. I was to work before anyone else. And I just got everything set up for the meeting, and people were really happy coming in. So that's just like, okay, maybe that's not going to happen, but just like even starting to put your mind there. Hey, what could be unexpectedly awesome? I wasn't even thinking of the radio before because I was just so focused on all the terrible things. But actually, I could put really nice music on. Even if it's not on the radio, I've got it on my phone. So, coming up with the situation that's unexpectedly awesome. And for each of these, if you can really dig into details, that helps. Because details, when we're thinking about the future, make something seem more real, make something seem more realistic. So you don't need to necessarily add tons of details to your anxiety story because your anxiety will kick in all that it wants. But when you start getting into wait, how could this be unexpectedly awesome? Start filling in details. Yeah, like we did the weather and the music, and maybe your hair is just looking great, and maybe, I don't know, maybe there's a short line for coffee, and it ends up being great coffee, and they give you two because they overmade one. So like fill in all those details of like, hey, and actually connecting in with those details, even when you're doing it for the future, hits a lot of the same like emotional positivity as when you're connecting to beautiful details from your past. Like even if you were remembering that time that you got 2 coffees for free, and you're like, oh yeah, that felt really good. Even if you're thinking about the future of like, I could get 2 coffees for free, that'd be awesome. You're actually starting to connect with the same emotional centers, and shifting yourself into that more positive emotion. And then what I do for the last one is come up with a narrative where you are inspiring somebody by the way you live. And that one I think is really cool because it's not just because you're not prey as much to the circumstances. Maybe traffic was terrible and you took that opportunity to really look around at the people that are stuck in traffic with you and just wish them well. Maybe you're praying for them or sending them positive vibes or like going through like a peaceful mantra or meditation while you're driving. And because you've done that, you're able to like positively influence the cars around you. But then also the way you show up to work. You're like, yeah, that was really hard traffic. Like I'm late, I know it. But you're also bringing a peace with you. And then that peace can affect somebody. And then somebody can look at you and be like, wow, that's actually really impressive. Even though you're late, like the presence that you're bringing into the room is good for others. And the way that we can inspire people is often when circumstances aren't quite exactly right. And so being able to think through one situation from 4 different lenses is a really cool experiment for one situation, but it also trains your brain to say, hey, whoa, there are different filters I can try on. I'm so used to being in the negative, everything's problematic filter. But that doesn't, and when we're in there, that's the thing. When we're in there, we think that's exactly how the world works and we're understanding everything perfectly and yep, that's it. Everything's this way. But when you start trying on new filters, you're like, oh, things could actually be different. I use this example of somebody laughing. Like, you say something and somebody laughs. Like, you could take that as like, whoa, we're connected. Like, you got my joke. Or, yeah, that was kind of a silly thing I did. And we're like good friends and you could laugh. Or you can take that as a sign of rejection. Hey, why you're making fun of me? Like, I did one little one little silly thing, and you make fun of me for it and you reject me for it. And I can actually like close down, crumple up. But it's the same laughter that I'm interpreting. And in one way, I'm actually more connected to you, feeling more happy with you. And the other way, I actually feel really rejected and far away from you. It's that interpretation of the world. So let's try to recap. We have this ye seek and ye find cycle, which is the what's going on inside of me tells me what's important, what I need to look for in the world around me. And then when I have that filter on, I'm much more likely to find that. I'm much more likely to find something that matches. Like if I'm in a threat vigilant state, looking for threats, I'm way more likely to find all the threats and to find the small ones and to interpret ambiguous data as threatening. Or if I'm in like a really happy, positive state, I'm more likely to see the sunshine and the birds and kind of I trip on the sidewalk and that's kind of silly, and more likely to interpret the world around me in terms of that lens. And then that reinforces it. And so we get into this place of what my inner world actually affects literally how I see my external world. And how I see my external world comes back and affects the way I behave and feel in the internal world. So I hope you like this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe. I'm going to do one every week. And just keep getting into topics like this, where we match psychology with how we can actually operate and live better in the world. So thank you for joining me on Whole Human Psychology. Take care.